Hey friends, welcome to OneChurch. If you're visiting with us, my name's Alex, I'm the lead pastor. For all of you regular attenders, I'm just praying for you. We're on New York on pause for a little while longer at least, and I know speaking to some of you, it's getting tough. For some of you, you're finding your anxiety levels are raising. For some of you, it's just, there's that isolation experience. May you know the presence of the risen Jesus. We've got some more plans to do some community stuff together, mostly through Zoom, and so you're going to be hearing more and more about all of those each and every week. But we are praying for you because we know it's not always easy. We had a moment not long ago just where I was starting to get a little aware that my hair's getting longer and longer. I always have long hair. I've had it for ages. And like all guys with long hair, we have a very intense relationship with our hair. And it just got to the point where it's like, I need a little off. And so my wonderful wife said to me, well, I could cut it for you. I've seen my sister cut hair. And I said, that's not the same thing. And she said, no, I can do it. So she watched a couple of videos. And then we got to the moment where we were about to sit down and do the thing that makes a haircut possible. Scissors were about to touch hair. And just before that happened, she said to me, I'm just going to watch the video one more time. And I said, I need you to be at a point where you don't need to watch the video one more time to trust that this is going to be okay. And so we paused that as well. But we will get there. I'm sure that it's going to be fine. And for those of you that have done the quarantine haircut, shout out to Todd Gilbert, who went full bald, shaved it all off. Good for you, but I won't be joining you. We're going to head over and we're going to worship with our worship team. Thank you so much to those of you that have been giving and keeping the church functioning so well. Again, I'm just so thankful. If you want to give, if you're maybe just connecting with us, you can give online at www.onechurchcliftonpark.org/giving. It should come up below me as I'm talking. And we're really thankful for you doing that. There's going to be some more announcements at the end of the service, so if you want to stick around and listen to those, looking forward to connecting with you. Love you guys. Enjoy the service.
Good morning, OneChurch. We are so glad you're joining us again this morning. Let's praise our Lord as we remember that He is risen.
Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Who love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with lowly thunder? Who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder? The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Sing, worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
This morning, we want you to take a moment. Take a moment to just breathe. There's been so much going on, and sometimes we forget to take those quiet moments to just breathe in the presence of God. Breathe in that comfort. Breathe in that peace. Breathe in that holy presence. Let His Spirit fill you, renew you, settle your soul. Open your heart. Let our beautiful, wonderful, amazing God in. Lord, we thank you for this moment of breathing in your presence. Remembering that you give us this breath. Amen. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your very word spoken to me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me, and I'm desperate for you. And I'm lost without you. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me, and I'm desperate for you. And I'm lost without you. And I'm longing for you. And I'm resting in you. And I'm desperate for you. And I'm lost without you. And I'm longing for you. And I'm resting in you. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe.
For the second time in my life, I'm guilty of committing a crime. Parole violation. Of course, I doubt they'll toss up any roadblocks for that. Not for an old crook like me. Fort Hancock, Texas, please. I find I'm so excited I can barely sit still or hold a thought in my head. I think it's the excitement only a free man can feel. A free man at the start of a long journey whose conclusion is uncertain. I hope I can make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I hope.
So I just love this clip. This is the end of Shawshank Redemption, which is a movie that's far too old for me to apologize if you've not seen it. No spoiler apologies for movies before 2017. And this is like 1994. But it ends on this idea of hope. And this is the idea that we're going to look at over the next few weeks. We're going to look at Jesus' post-resurrection appearances to his disciples. And we're going to look at them in the light of he's coming and he's bringing hope to people in the dark. So we've literally called it hope in the dark because aren't they in dark places when you think about it? Think about what they experience. They follow Jesus. He's now dead. They're scared. They're not running but hidden away because they don't know what's going to happen to them. And then there's a rumor that he's alive. And I wonder whether that doesn't actually complicate the matter for some of them. Yes, it's exciting, but it almost, it's got that sense of like, well, what do we do now? Are we sure this is the case? Like, what if it's not? Can I risk everything again? And we're going to watch as Jesus comes and he brings this wonderful unpacking of the resurrection to some of the disciples that are in these incredibly dark places. And so we're going to look at a few different stories over the next few weeks. We're going to look at his appearance to a lady called Mary Magdalene, to these two disciples on a road to a place called Emmaus, which we're going to do today, to a guy called Peter that was supposed to be one of his main guys and has really let him down, to another guy called Thomas, and then to the group of disciples as a whole. And just trying to unpack some of what's going on here. And just watch as Jesus, in incredible ways, works through what these guys have been through. I love this season. So this is a season in the church calendar that's called Eastertide. So you may not know that the church has a calendar, and I don't mean our church, but the worldwide church for many, many years has had this thing called the liturgical calendar, where we recognized, very smart people said, we need seasons in life. And it's really helpful when those seasons come around regularly and we talk about the same things over and over again because we get to reflect and learn new things together. So the church calendar starts in Advent before Christmas. Then you have Christmastide. Then you have a season called Ordinary Time. And then you have Lent and then Eastertide, which is a beautiful name. And so we're now in Eastertide. And what I love about this moment is, for the most part, if I were to hand you a New Testament and say, open to a passage, let's pick one, John chapter 10, and I were to say, when in the calendar is this? You would say, I have no clue. And I would agree with you. I would have no clue either. Unless you were an incredibly serious scholar or some kind of really intuitive reader, there's really nothing to tell you when it is, except for this season. When right now we know exactly when it is. Right now we're getting almost like in sports analogy, we're getting play-by-play. And we know where we are. We're right after Easter. And we're moving towards a festival called Pentecost. So Easter is where as a church we celebrate Jesus died and came back to life. Pentecost is what's called the birth of the church. And again, if you're new to church, that's fine. We're going to talk about it in a few weeks. So if you want to stick with us, we'll get a load of unpacking. But it's, in simple terms, it's where this book called Acts says that God sent his Spirit to live inside us as Jesus followers. Man, that's a lot. So if you didn't follow that or you're not sure about that, I understand. We'll come back to it. But it's, again, these two festivals. Now, when Jesus did his thing, he took two Jewish festivals that had been there for a good 1,400 years. Which is the reason the religious leaders had such a problem with him. It's no different than if I came to you and said, Christmas, that time that we celebrated, that's now about Alex. As our church, we're going to make it about me, and you're going to worship me on Christmas. That's as blasphemous as they felt it was. Jesus takes these two old festivals that remembered there was this time where Jewish people were slaves in Egypt, and God rescued them. They called that festival Passover because death passed over. Death passed over in this physical, temporary sense. They didn't die when loads of other people did, and then God took them out into the desert, and then a few weeks later on this festival, this festival called Shavuot, he gave them his law and said, this is what living like God looks like. Those two festivals had basically framed what it was to be Jewish for a long time. And then Jesus came along and said, remember that festival that was about temporarily not dying? I'm going to make it about me and my story where the resurrection is still physical, but it's an eternal, forever thing. And it's not just Jewish people, this is everyone. I remember that festival, which was about a law that you obeyed on the outside, and it allowed you to live like the people of God, but it didn't change your heart. Well, I'm going to make it about changing your heart. And then this season, this Eastertide is this moment in between that, where Jesus is unpacking to his followers, as I said. He's unpacking this idea of what does resurrection mean? He's going to bring hope to people that are right now hopeless. They are in dark places. And Jesus is going to use the Tolkien language, he's going to kindle hope in them. And it's amazing to watch. But before we talk about hope, what I was thinking is, and we're going to read this passage where the disciples walking to Emmaus, where Jesus meets with them in a second. I thought it would be useful for us to get kind of some common ground on, well, what do we mean by hope? Because what I think is, in the West, in the 21st century, hope has come to mean something like last chance. It's got that ring of, it probably won't happen, but because I like you, I hope you get lucky. Maybe lottery cards are about scratching off with hope. Probably won't happen, but I hope I'll win the big ticket. Matching my numbers, and I used to do that as a kid. I had this deal with my dad. It's incredible to believe I bought into this, but I wasn't old enough to buy lottery tickets, so I made a deal with him that I would pay for it, he would go and buy it, and if we won, I got 10% and he got the other 90%. And I think he said that he would give some of his 90% to my siblings as well. So for paying for the ticket, I think I got to pick the numbers, although maybe we had to play family birthdays, but essentially I got the same as my siblings. So I was putting all the money in the middle and they were potentially getting the same return. But maybe that's what hope, and it never worked because I'm still doing this job. No, I would do this job even if I had won the lottery because I love it. But it's got that sense, hasn't it? That's what we think about when we think about hope. And maybe a picture analogy would be it's sitting at a poker table. Somehow all of your chips are in the middle of the table. You know what your opponent has, and there's one card left to turn, and there's one card in the deck that could help you. Other than that, you're done, you're finished. And so you're waiting for it to turn, and you're like, it's probably not going to happen, but I hope it does. That's probably our understanding of hope. I'm not sure when the Bible talks about hope that's what it thinks about, or that's the idea that it would get on board with. I don't think any of the writers of these New Testament stories would feel that way about hope. I think that when they talk about hope, and a book called Corinthians that a guy called Paul writes, he talks about there being three pillars to faith. There's faith, hope, and love, or three pillars to life now. There's faith, hope, and love. And so hope is important in the New Testament stories. When they talk about hope, I think they talk more about like a confident expectation of things, something that's going to happen. It's the idea of I hope that the sun comes up. Well, what do I mean by hope? I haven't seen it. I can't walk into the future. But I know from my past experiences that the sun comes up every day. And it has done it faithfully. And it means that I believe that the future is going to be good in that respect. I believe that I will see that sunrise. I think that taps in a little bit more to what a New Testament-y idea of hope might be. It's not just last chance saloon. It's this confident expectation. I believe that this God is good. And there's another element to this Bible hope that we'll get to at the end, but I'll just give you a little hint at it in that the Bible's idea of hope doesn't have to have a good outcome. Everything doesn't have to go right, and we'll get to that as we walk towards the end. But this is what the Bible talks about when it talks about hope. And it also talks about the idea that hope is essential to living, that we need hope to live, that life without hope is not really life at all, it's just existence. Have you ever had one of those moments where someone uses a word that you know and you think you're using it in a different way to the way that I would use it? And I think that is how the Bible might feel about our use of the word life at times. Life, we use it in terms of existence. And life is more than just existing. And I think we can understand that well by understanding how we think about prison. So think for a second, depending on your political persuasion, perhaps, or your philosophy on what prison should look like, you might say that prison is either on one hand about retribution, and the other hand it's about rehabilitation. And your view of what a prison should be like will probably be really different depending on how you see that. So, if you think that prison is mainly about rehabilitation, then prison will keep as many aspects of everyday life as possible. And if you think it's mainly about retribution, it will remove as many of those elements of everyday life as you possibly can get away with. So on one hand, it will be about how do we give people the tools to live a different life in the future? And on the other hand, it will be about how do we punish them for what they've done? And I'm not saying either is right or wrong, but I am saying that that side of things, that retributive side, at the end of it, it can really become like about hopelessness. This is a picture of Black Dolphin Prison in Russia. It's known as the worst prison in the world. And when you look at what happens to people that are in this prison, it is really just existing, and there is no hope there. Most of them are there for life without any possibility of parole. You're in your cell for 23 hours a day. You're not allowed to relax during your time in your cell. You have to stay alert. You're not allowed to lie down on your bed. You're not allowed to sort of recline in a resting posture. Everything about it is designed to keep you alert all the time. You're allowed out into a cage for a 45-minute exercise. When you're taken into the prison, you're taken in with, you're blindfolded or have a bag put over your head so you can't map it out to try and escape. When you're moved from one section to another, they move you with your hands tied behind your back, then elevated above your body so you can't really there's nothing you can do. It's designed to put you in your weakest possible position. And think about what that does to your mentality. There is no reason to live. The only reason to live is to get to death. So when we talk about the difference between life in prison there, and again, this isn't a political thing, this is just an observation of how can you have any hope in that place? The poet Dante Alighieri said that the gates of hell have a phrase above it, abandon ye hope, all who enter in. And I think that that's how I'd feel going into a place like that. Same is true of the American supermax prisons in places like Colorado. How can that be life? There is no hope there. They are hopeless people. A lot of the times, to get a designation life without parole, it's just one step down from the death penalty, and to not get the death penalty, you have to agree to no more appeals and essentially sign away that sense of freedom or the right to appeal to a higher authority. It's done. You are there until the moment you cease to exist. But you're not really living. I'd say the absence of hope in our everyday lives is almost that bad. And what we're going to watch over these next few weeks is we're going to watch as this incredible Jesus, what he does is he very gently, he comes alongside his disciples who are hurting, broken, despairing, in dark places. Very gently walks into their lives again. He brings hope. There's times where, as I've sort of unpacked this series for myself, there's been a sense of almost coming to tears in the gentleness of what Jesus does. These are passages of therapy. These are passages of kindness. There's so much goodness here as this God brings about hope. And my feeling is that this is going to be transformative for so many people as we unpack some of the things in ourselves that are sort of lurking below the surface that we're like, I should have dealt with that, or at least I wish I had dealt with that. Some of the brokenness that's in all of us. And so we're going to start with this story about these disciples on the road to Emmaus. So I'm going to read from this book, Luke. If you are a Bible person, it's chapter 24. You can read along with me, or you can watch as the words come up on the screen. Here we go. Now, that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. They talked and discussed these things with each other, and Jesus himself came up, walking along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened here in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. And they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. So we begin with this story of these two guys. They've left Jerusalem. The first question we might ask is, where are they going? And it's a simple answer. They're going to a town called Emmaus, a few miles down the road. But the better question might be, well, why are they going there? It would be generous to say that they had previous engagements or a plan to go. Passover was a time that people traveled. But the followers of Jesus, it would seem, stay where he was. And we don't know of any Jesus plans to leave. It seemed like he was there for a while. And then think about the events that have taken place. Jesus has died on the Friday. And then there's the Saturday, and no one can go anywhere on the Saturday. It's like New York on pause. It's like what we're experiencing now. They have to stay. They're not allowed to go more than a certain distance. That would be Jewish rules for Sabbath. And so they would make plans on the Saturday maybe, but then Sunday's when things happen. And what it seems happens is that most of the followers of Jesus decided they were going to hunker down. They were going to stay in Jerusalem, lock themselves in a room, and hope that the Romans that might come searching for Jesus' friends and followers don't come searching. Maybe they won't be satisfied with killing the leader, but maybe they will. Maybe everything will be okay. And so these guys, they seem like they have a different approach. Their plan is, we're going to get out of town. So they leave. And do we blame them, to be honest? Like when we think about why they're leaving, let's think about a couple of things that might drive them. So one is a ton of painful experiences. They had expected Jesus to change everything, and now he was dead. And there's a rumor of resurrection, but that might not be enough to keep them there. By nature, I am an avoider. So if you know the Enneagram, it's a personality test. So I'm an Enneagram 7. So what that means is 7s don't like anything painful. We like to think everything is good all the time. So if you think about a person who says, this glass is half empty, this glass is half full, I'm like, combine the two glasses and you've got one full glass. If you think the glass is half empty, it's just because you see wrong. Glasses are always full for an Enneagram 7. We're always positive. We always spin everything in the best possible light. I don't like thinking about painful things, and I avoid them. My wife is a 9. And what a 9 does is they don't like talking about painful things. They don't like conflict. So that means that as a married couple, we manage to go through most of life not talking about painful things, which I guess it could be a good thing. But in life, pushing things down into painful places, actually that's not a helpful thing. These guys show that they're clearly just downcast, suffering people. Look at the first passage where they meet with Jesus on the road. It says this, as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast, and one of them named Cleopas asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" They stood still, their faces downcast. It's that position of like, I just feel hopeless. I feel in a very dark place right now. I used to coach soccer when I lived in Michigan. And I remember coaching these young high school guys in this game where they were playing another local school. And it went disastrously badly. We were 3 goals down at halftime. And I watched as these guys walked off the pitch and every one of them trudged off looking at the ground. And you can't play soccer looking at the ground. That's why when you do something wrong, your teammates might say something to you like, lift your head up, pick your head up, because naturally that position goes to, I'm despondent, I'm a mess. These guys are hurting, broken people. When Jesus says, what are you discussing? They stood still. They were downcast. These guys are limping away from Jerusalem. They're not limping physically, but they're limping metaphorically. They are hurt people. There's this brokenness to them in this story. And they seem to be, personality-wise, the ones that are going to try and shove it away. They're going to leave. They're going to push it deep down. And don't we do that like they do that? Aren't the things that we just don't deal with very well? We try and hide them somewhere inside us. The philosopher Peter Rollins talks about the idea of graves and graveyards. And one of the things he says is this. We tend to write something on gravestones, or lots of gravestones, something like, gone but not forgotten. And so if there were ghosts in the graveyard, then these would be the ghosts of people that were gone but not forgotten. But what he actually goes on to say is this: the worst ghosts that are forgotten but not gone. And those are the things, the painful memories, experiences that we shove deep inside and we try and hide from them. We try and pretend that no, that didn't happen. We shut it away as far as we can put it. But actually there's just damage deep inside us that we have to deal with at some point. These guys are people that are experiencing pain. And they're also experiencing fear. They're terrified. The Romans might come looking for them at any moment. It could be disastrous for them. So they're running away from those things. They're running away from everything that could happen. Yes, they're running away from painful experiences in the past, but they're running away from fearful ideas of what the future might look like for them. There's this wonderful phrase that says this: fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate to suffering. Maybe the wisest thing that's ever said outside the Bible. And it is, of course, the legendary Yoda who says it to Luke Skywalker. Fear is this thing this terror of what might happen. Terror of who might hurt you. And it leads to this sense of anger. Usually when we're fearful, we feel out of control. And isn't that appropriate to talk about right now? You might feel completely out of control. And so fear builds up. What happens if this virus that everyone's talking about gets me as well? Maybe you see people that aren't living or responding to it the way that you would want them to respond to, so you have that sense of anger. Again, it's been out of control. And these emotions spiral in on each other. And it's not something that's explicitly talked about in the Bible in the same way it is by Yoda, but it's there all over the pages of it. What happens when we become fearful? It's this spiral of, I'm so angry, I'm so out of control. And then that anger turns to this hate directed at someone else. And then hate finally leads to this sense of suffering. Suffering for us, and then sometimes for the other person as well. What we're watching here is 2 disciples that are living in that cauldron of painful experiences in the past. How can faith ever be the same again? How can the temple ever be the same again? Jesus unpacked God for them in ways that they never imagined anyone could. How can they go back? How can they just stay in Jerusalem like everything's normal? They've got to get away. But also fear. Fear is driving them. They have to get out of Dodge. They can't stay and fight. The potential for what the future looks like is just too terrifying. What we're watching here is 2 people that aren't limping physically, but limping metaphorically, because there's so much brokenness inside of them. The writer Richard Rohr talks about how whatever inside us that is not transformed, whatever negative experiences we've pushed deep inside, whatever's not transformed will be transmitted. It's another way of saying something that we've said as a church before: hurt people hurt people. When we're broken, when we're messed up inside, there's this idea that, in actual fact, we kind of do damage to other people. The truth is, that's sometimes just our way of trying to get control of the situation. The speaker, Stan Mitchell, tells this really just heartbreakingly tragic story, and I hope I can get it out without some obvious emotion, because the idea that this could happen to someone was just terrifying. He talks about a 6-year-old girl in Guatemala whose parents were killed during a conflict there, and a brother that was then taken away by a rival faction and trained to be a child soldier. This girl had lost everything. And the people in the orphanage said she was kind, she was quiet, shy. But then something happened that made them realize just how broken she was from what she'd been through. The nuns talked about one day finding her stood in the garden there, and she was holding a butterfly in her hand, this beautiful, innocent little creature. And she was slowly and methodically pulling the wings from the butterfly. And as she was doing it, she was muttering, "Pobrecita, pobrecita, pobrecita." Poor little one, poor little one, poor little one. This poor girl was so hurt and broken, so many painful experiences, so much fear that turns into anger, that turns into hate, that turns into suffering. She, suffering herself, was causing suffering to this innocent little creature. And we don't blame her, we don't hold that against her, but oh, what brokenness and what hurt to lead to that position. And this is this place that these disciples are. It's impossible for us in our Western understanding and connection to faith to know just what it was costing them, just what it had cost them to follow Jesus, and just what it would cost them into the future, just what fears they had about what life would look like now, just how central everything about faith was to everyday life back then. But everything has changed them now. They are terrified and they are hurting and they are walking on a road to Jerusalem. And how can anything ever be the same again? That's what they're going through. And this is the moment that this Jesus will walk alongside them in his kindness and his love, as if he has nowhere better to be. This is what he finds important in these post-resurrection appearances. He walks alongside these earliest followers, these pobrecitas, these poor little ones, painful, scared, unsure of what the future holds, living in a dark place with no hope for the future. And Jesus will walk alongside them. So, next part. What things, Jesus asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death. They crucified him, but we hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. What is more, it is the 3rd day since all of this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. So what we hear from these disciples is this. We hear that they've heard the rumor of resurrection. The resurrection is this true thing that has happened. It has changed the universe. They've heard about it, but it's not true for them yet. The resurrection was true, but it wasn't yet true for them. And we watch as this Jesus, in this incredible way, will walk with them through that journey, in the same way that he would walk through it with you and I. Isn't it true that there's ways that the resurrection story, with all that it means, with its offer of new life, its offer of something that deals with the scars and the wounds and the pain and the fear that we have inside of us? Isn't it true that just like these disciples needed Jesus to walk through that with them, that we need that at times as well? There's these things that we've buried so deep and we're like, I wish I'd dealt with that. I should have dealt with that. I'd like to deal with that. All those different ideas, and yet still they lurk there and still they're below the surface. And so often aren't we the pobrecitas? Aren't we the poor little ones that need Jesus to do what he's about to do with these guys? Because the thing is coming. It's about to happen. But right now what we hear from them is, I've heard about it. We've heard the rumor, but it hasn't become true for me yet. And so often don't we in our own hearts say, might it be true for me as well? Might resurrection become a thing that isn't just a story from a couple of thousand years ago, isn't just a hope in a sense of the lottery ticket, last card on the table, but isn't it possible that it become this thing that bursts out from inside of me? Aren't we like that at times? And doesn't all the pain and the fear and the brokenness inside of us, doesn't it at times, doesn't it attach or attack other people in our ways or desires to control something? And might it be that there's healing for us somewhere? Might it be that there can be a new story that bursts out of our old stories? And this is what Jesus is about to do with these two, limping as they are from Jerusalem with all their pain and all their hurt and all their emotion. And watch what happens in this moment. And he said to them, how foolish you are. It's like he takes them, so little children, how foolish you are, little pobrecitas, how foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it is nearly evening, the day is almost over. And he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread and gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us when he talked on the road and opened the scriptures to us? What incredible joy. There's this moment where he does the thing that he did a few days ago. He broke the bread, and he gives them the cup, and suddenly they're like, oh, that's what it meant. They missed it. They'd missed it on Friday, and now on Sunday they get a second chance, and suddenly it's like, oh. And that's what resurrection is as an experience. Resurrection is, oh, were not our hearts burning inside as he talked to us? Oh, were not our eyes closed when he did it before? It's that moment of like, oh, thank goodness it is true, and it is life-changing. This is the difference between hearing a rumor of resurrection and experiencing resurrection. And isn't there a deep longing that awakes in each of us as we read that and hear that and say, I would love it to become more true for me. And I love how their story arc closes out, because their story arc starts with this line that says two men were walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, two men that, as we've unpacked, are full of pain and regret and full of fear about what the future might hold. And then suddenly we're ending with the next part, which says this: they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. It's nighttime. Everyone's going to sleep, and they are up. They've stopped Jesus going on because they've said it's too late to go anywhere, and suddenly they're up and they're on their way back. This is this transformative story that's bookmarked by two disciples walking from Jerusalem, and it ends with two disciples walking, or almost running back towards Jerusalem. They've come limping, and now they walk whole, and that's what resurrection does. Resurrection takes our scars and our wounds and our brokenness, and it says, no, there are new endings possible. It takes our story as it is and says there are new endings for you today. That's the hope of resurrection. That's the dream. That's real hope. That's what the Bible means when it talks about hope. As we talk about hope in the dark over the next few weeks, that's what we're looking for. We're going to end by talking just for a second about the fact that the biblical hope has this mystical element to it. Because it doesn't even demand that the outcome is great. When these two disciples run back to Jerusalem, everything that they've been worried about may still be true. The fear of the Romans may still be a real thing. They may die for that faith. And thousands of Christians did die for this faith early on. That's what made the resurrection such a startling piece of news. It meant that you could walk into death without all the fear. The mystical element of this faith didn't require a good outcome. There was something about it that said, no, it's okay, even if everything isn't great. And that's been true of the faith that this Bible talks about even before Jesus' time. Back in Daniel, there's this wonderful story about these three awesomely named guys called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who end up in a furnace. And there's this wonderful faith statement that people have hooked onto for years. Laura and I actually have it above our fire. I'm going to dig it out for you here a second. It's in Daniel chapter 3. When this king Nebuchadnezzar demands that they bow down to a statue, he says to them, I'm going to throw you in the furnace if you don't. And they respond with this startling thing, which is just a great definition for us of what real hope is, or mystical hope is. They say this: King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of the god of gold that you have set up. It's that sense of it doesn't matter if it turns out exactly as I want. I believe that the sun will rise tomorrow morning because the sun has risen in the past. I have this hope that is bigger and beyond. This is what Jesus will do over the next few weeks. He'll walk alongside his earliest followers in hurting, dark, broken places. He'll walk with them and lead them into stories of resurrection. He takes them from people who have heard the rumor to people who have experienced it for themselves. It doesn't make everything easy, but it is life-changing. My hope is that you and I experience life change as we continue to walk together. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for stories of resurrection. They make all the difference in the world. Thank you for your presence with us as we've learned. Help us to grasp that deep hope when we find ourselves in dark places. May it be transformative for us. Amen. Hey, to all you guys that stick around for the after-service part. Love you guys. Wish you were here with me right now, just doing community together. But we are so thankful for you, and I'd love to just hear how you're doing. I'm trying to get round everyone at least fairly often, but we just value that connection. We've got some more things starting up over the next 2 weeks. We are starting some groups, so you can jump in on those, and more will come. So that's exciting to be able to do those Bible studies and connection groups together online. And I'm putting together a quiz for us to figure out doing online as well. So that's something to look out for in the next couple of days, because we just want to increase that sense of community. If you're not getting emails from us, you can send an email to admin@onechurchcliftonpark.org, and that will help us get you on the email system, or you can sign up on the Facebook page. But we just want to make sure that we're staying in touch. It looks like we're going to be doing this for a few more weeks, and I'm praying that we just see some amazing fruit from it long run. Please pray for our leadership team. We're meeting together tomorrow to talk through some stuff, but we're super thankful for each and every one of you. And thanks for doing church with us today. Have a great rest of your Sunday.